Welcome to today's video. I'm Rick Chapo with DMCAagentservice.com. Today we're stepping back from the details of the DMCA and looking at it more from an overall perspective. Specifically, what is the DMCA and why is it significant? The DMCA is a federal law in the United States that deals with copyright in the online environment. It's a unique law in that the motivation for it wasn't necessarily originating in the United States. Instead, in the mid-1990s, there was an international organization called the World Intellectual Property Organization. They still exist today. But in the mid-1990s, they were looking at this newfangled thing called the internet and trying to figure out how intellectual property laws, which include copyright, were going to apply. Now you have to keep in mind that copyright law has been around for hundreds of years, and a lot of the foundational court decisions and code for the law were written well before anybody even had an idea of something called the internet. And so if you look at those rules and regulations, they really weren't going to apply well online, and it was pretty easy to see that chaos was going to be the result. So WIPO and its members, of which the United States was one, tried to come up with guidelines to address that. In 1996, they published those guidelines, and the member states were supposed to incorporate them into law. And in fact, in the United States, in 1998, a bill was introduced to Congress known as the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And in October of 1998, President Clinton signed it into law. And so the DMCA was essentially what we might consider a foundational law of the internet. It is one of those laws that if it didn't exist, the internet would look significantly different. You would most likely not have the sharing environment that you have now, and websites that are built on user-generated content typically probably wouldn't exist. So we're talking YouTube, Facebook, sites of this sort, which we'll get into a bit more here. But the DMCA, so what actually is it? Most people think there's one focus of the DMCA, and that's to deal with situations where somebody copies content off of your site and republishes it somewhere else. And that is one focus, but there are actually three focuses. So the first one addresses something known as the circumvention of digital rights management systems. A digital rights management system is one where you have a closed digital environment, if you will. Let's use an example as a movie on DVD. So you go out and you buy a movie on the DVD, you bring it home. That DVD has a security system built into it that prevents you from copying the movie. Now, if you violate that security system, if you breach it so you can copy the movie, well, you're circumventing the DRM system, and that is illegal. And so obviously illegal carries important ramifications of jail time and things of that sort. Do you see movies ripped and reposted online? Yes, all the time. But that act nonetheless is still considered illegal under the first focus, the first element of the DMCA. So that's the first focus. The second focus is probably the reason that you're here and looking for DMCA information, and that is the safe harbor immunity provisions found in Section 512. So what these provisions say when they're boiled down is basically an internet platform or an internet-connected app cannot be held liable for copyright infringement claims based on content uploaded by users. And the important part of that is uploaded by users. So let's take an example. I create a new DMCA video for publication on YouTube, and for some reason I decide to upload a Rolling Stones song as the background music. When I upload that video to YouTube, I'm arguably committing copyright infringement because I'm using that song without permission or authorization. So in that situation, I can be held liable for copyright infringement, but can YouTube? And the answer is no, as long as they follow a particular compliance procedure, which isn't particularly difficult. But so long as they do that, then they are not going to be held liable because of the safe harbor provisions of the DMCA give them immunity. And so that's an incredibly important thing if you think it through. While it may seem less so right now, think about, in the early 1990s. Let's take Facebook. Facebook launches, I think it launched in the 2000s, but whenever it launched, imagine if there was no DMCA. And in the first year, it got hit with, 5,000 copyright infringement lawsuits. Would Facebook exist today? The answer is probably no. And it wouldn't even really deal so much with the merit of those lawsuits as just the simple cost of defending them. The attorney's fees involved defending them would have probably swamped the company and sent it into bankruptcy. And, would the disappearance of Facebook be a good thing? Well, we can certainly discuss that in another video. But you have to keep in mind that this would apply to all user-generated content websites, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, whatever. And the internet itself would just look radically different than it does now. And it probably would be, frankly, pretty weak because it would pretty much be a place where you went to buy things, and that was about it. The exchange of information and ideas probably really wouldn't exist because websites, they just couldn't afford to do it because they would have to defend all these lawsuits. They probably wouldn't be able to get insurance, and it would just be kind of a nightmare. So the safe harbor provisions are critical, and they're hugely significant. And that's why the DMCA is law you really need to understand. Because whether people are taking your content or you're allowing users to post to your website or your app, you need to understand how the process works. The third focus of the DMCA is something technical that won't apply to most people, but basically it just made it clear that webcasting would be included in the compulsory licensing laws. And what that means essentially is before the internet, if you're driving around, you're listening to the radio and they play a song, there are copyright rules that apply to that, and certain royalty rates have to be paid, things of that sort. So the third focus of the DMCA just says that if that's done online instead of with a terrestrial radio station, those rates still apply. So a site like Pandora, when they play a song, they have to pay a royalty rate to the publisher of that music. So again, probably something you're not really going to deal with, but it is a part of the law. So why is the DMCA significant? Well, it pretty much sets the standard for how copyright issues are going to be dealt with online. And with this newfangled internet thing that came around in the 1990s, there are a lot of critics, and there are some justified criticisms of the DMCA. But up to this point, nobody's really come up with a better option or a better solution. Maybe they will, but it doesn't really seem likely at this point, and there doesn't seem to be much motivation in the federal government to make any changes to the DMCA. So it's probably going to be around for another 20 or 30 years, at which time, maybe there'll be some small changes, but it just doesn't seem like there's much of a move to do anything different with it. So there you go. So that's it for today's subject. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach us at dmcaagentservice.com. Just use the contact form and we'll be happy to answer them. And please consider subscribing to our channel, as we'll be publishing DMCA videos frequently. Thanks.